The following session was recorded live in San Antonio, Texas for the 2003 CALLERLAB Conference. This is tape number 5, One Call Dance.
Welcome. We'd like to welcome all of you here to this session on the One Call Dance. We're glad that so many of you could show up. There are just a few seats down here toward the front. I see some little few, maybe a half dozen seats there to the right-hand side. Love to have you come and join us. Don't stand around the outside walls. Go ahead and find a spot to sit down and join the session. This is being taped, and for all taped sessions, you will be reminded if you would like to ask a question later on or make a comment to step to one of the microphones in the center aisle so that we can get all of the information on the tape for the benefit of those buying and listening to the tapes later. My name is Gregg Anderson from Colorado Springs. I'm assisted this morning on the panel by Otto Warteman from Trinity, Texas. Between the two of us, we've done a few dance parties over the years, and we hope that what we will be able to offer you this morning, while not literally be talking about a one-call dance, what we're implying by the title is that we will be offering suggestions to you to make your dance parties successful from the viewpoint of simplification. Life, as we know around us, has gotten much too complicated. Some of the complications are easier to adapt to than others, but I checked into the hotel over the weekend and noticed that even life in hotels has gotten more complicated. I had no soap in my room. There was a very pretty box that said clarifying bar. I thought, and it opened it up, and it looked like soap to me, so I used it as soap, but it's a clarifying bar, and I just thought that was a sign that life has gotten too complicated. But we're going to uncomplicate your lives here this morning with this session, hopefully, by providing some information that will hopefully benefit the programs that you're doing. We will have a handout at the end of the program which you'll be able to pick up, but we don't want you to be distracted by the handout by holding it in your hands and making notes and getting ahead of us. We don't want you to anticipate the call. I'm going to turn the program over for the first part here to my cohort, Otto, here. He'll have some comments, and then I'll add some things later on. Otto?
The only reason I brought this pad up here is I had to do something with my hands. I want you to know that looks are deceiving. Although he looks younger, he has more experience at what we're doing. And I'm going to just start with a little something about my background as it comes to one-night parties. We started calling one-night parties essentially in 1972 when I had a phone call and was asked to go to Peaceful Valley Lodge in Colorado. And for those of you that are not familiar with Peaceful Valley Lodge and what it did, it sold their services and got people to come out that were square dancers and also non-dancers. So we would have 6 squares of square dancers and we'd have 6 squares of non-dancers. And hopefully we felt that if we did a party dance for these people, they would leave and go back and become square dancers. And many did. But it was an experience of taking just the bare minimum basics and having a good evening's dance. I always look at an evening on one-night party or a first night lesson as the opportunity to sell. I've been in sales for, well, I guess 40 years, and 35 of those years were straight commission. So I always look at things as having a goal. What is your goal for the evening? Are you going to teach a lot of moves, or are you just going to entertain? And I look at it now, for years I would go in and teach a beginner's set of lessons, and the goal was, if the club said, well, we're going to end at 26 weeks, I divided out how am I going to progress through these 26 weeks with what moves. And each evening, what you reviewed and what you started for the next week. And so I always set goals, the goal for the evening. But at the same time, goals have to be flexible. And so when I look at at a dance party, I come into the evening about an hour early to look at the atmosphere of the evening, what the people are wearing, what the sound would be like, and then I set goals for myself and how to start the dance and make it successful. And part of the goal is to entertain the people with the fewest amount of moves and make those moves so progressive that I'm not teaching. That's the number one goal is I am not a teacher, I'm an entertainer for the evening. And I had a good friend that used to call square dancing, and I was telling Mona how we talk about the right and left through and how difficult it is to drop hands in the pull by. Well, I started using California twirl, and she said, well, why don't you use just a pass-through and courtesy turn? Teach courtesy turn without having a lady's chain. Use courtesy turn. You can use courtesy turn anywhere. So when we talk about a few amount of moves through the evening in a 2.5-hour dance, I might use circle left, circle right, do-sa-do. I might use a lady's chain. I have used just a courtesy turn. I've used half promenades. I've not ever used a right and left through. And so we can do a whole evening with just a few moves. Within the line dancing, I think the only move we really use that's of any difficulty at all is a vine right or vine left. And most of the time I don't call it a vine. I call it a side close, side touch. And that way they don't have to put feet behind each other or cross in front of each other. It's just a side close, side touch. And so when I set up my program, it's a mental progression of one move, and the next dance will incorporate that move and reinforce it, and then the third dance might add a move and bring back the first move, and it keeps growing. For those of you that were there Saturday, you saw that I used just stomp your feet and clap your hands, and right elbow turn, left elbow turn. I never use a left Alaman. It's something that I've never used a left Alaman in the first night of lessons, and it's because I don't want the guys having to go the opposite direction that I want them to promenade. I don't want to confuse anybody. I want them to be successful. Part of my goal structure is make sure the dancers leave there so thrilled with accomplishment that they will be back, or they'll hire you back. The number one goal is repeat. And when the biggest thing that I am seeing in disappointment within our classes is that we push too hard the first night to reach that goal of so many moves in just a short period of time, that we have not sold the activity and the dance, and we've created this non-accomplishment, this joy of feeling like, hey man, I had a good time, I danced, and I danced real well. And I want the people to leave the dance like they have danced real well. And I can't do it by teaching a lot of moves. You want to add anything to this? He's much better at this.
You lie, but thank you anyway. What Otto said, one of the things that struck me is the feeling of accomplishment that you want the people at your dance to have. And obviously we all want that, but we can get short-sighted because of our experiences in calling for experienced square dancers. We sometimes can lose sight of the fact that we don't need the complexity to give that feeling of accomplishment, that feeling of joy to the people that are our party dances. We're really looking to limit the number of calls, but not to limit the variety. And there's a couple of ways, in my mind, a couple of basic ways of doing that. One is to thoroughly understand the definition of the call and how it can be used, and another is the variety of the dance forms. Exploring, first of all, the calls themselves, we find there are certain uses for do-so-do that we get accustomed to utilizing in our mainstream and plus programs. Although, as a side note, I must say that I rarely call do-so-do at a mainstream dance. I just got rid of it a few years ago when the dancers weren't doing a do-so-do anyway, so being stubborn enough, I just decided to quit calling it. But for the one-night party, it's a wonderful tool to use. And the variety, when you get to thinking about it, if you take any move that might be used at a one-nighter party, whether it's a do-so-do or a circle or a star, and you start thinking about, well, now, how many different ways can I do that particular maneuver? A do-so-do, obviously we can do-so-do our partner, we can do-so-do the corner. We don't need to call it a walk around the corner. It's still a do-so-do, it's just with a different person to make it easier, to not introduce more terms than we have to. We can have the men do-so-do with each other, the head ladies do-so-do. We can have head couples forward and back, forward again, do a do-so-do. So there becomes an almost unlimited variety that we can draw on just using something as simple as do-so-do. You can have number one couple stand back to back with your partner, walk around the outside of the square, meet her on the other side, do a do-sa-do. So that's just one couple doing it. You can have, as couples, do a do-sa-do. You're linking as a couple 2 by 2 and going around the other couple. So if you get in the habit of starting to brainstorm with yourself, or better yet, getting a group of other callers to sit down and talk about ideas, you can sometimes generate some amazing material utilizing a very few number of basics, but used from positions that you don't normally think of using in obviously in your mainstream and plus dances, but they would be very effective for a party night. One of the most fruitful discussions that I had in a callers college that I attended in the early 70s up at Frank Lane's place was where a bunch of callers sat around the table, and Frank said, okay, I want you to individually, round robin type of session, start coming up with as many ways as you can ponder, as you can come up with to accomplish head couples lead to the right, circle to a line. And it was amazing the amount of material that we came up with. Of course, in that particular exercise, we were utilizing other basics to get to a position. Whereas here, what I'm suggesting is taking a basic like do-so-do or promenade and brainstorming to find out how many different ways you can use that in your program. The other item that I mentioned when we talk about variety of dance forms, utilizing a do-so-do, you can obviously do it with squares, you can do it from Sicilian circles, and just to clarify the terminology in case you're not familiar with a Sicilian circle, a Sicilian circle is nothing more than a large circle of dancers with couples facing each other around the circle. That opens up the ability to use simple choreography, but you're not in a square formation, so it's yet one more aspect of variety that's added to your dance through the use of a different dance form. Trios is another way. Trios essentially the same thing as a Sicilian circle, only instead of couples facing couples, it's lines of 3. But the lines of 3 don't have to be facing each other. The lines of 3 can all be facing line of dance counterclockwise around the big circle, or the lines of 3 can be facing each other, alternating lines of 3 around the big circle. Either one of those gives its own dimension to the variety by a different dance form that can be used in your program. And once you've added the trios, a simple call like do-so-do can expand to, when you have trios, you must define you have a center of the line and you have 2 ends, one on each end. The ends can straight across do-so-do with each other. The centers can do-so-do. Centers face the one on your right in your own line, do-so-do. Centers face the one on the left in your own line, do-so-do. So an incredible amount of variety can be accomplished there. That's when I heard, I think Otto sent an email out once to a few of us, and he was talking about a group that he had, and where he had the lines of three, the trio lines of three, as a line of three do a do-so-do. So they retain handholds and move around the other line that they're facing. So the imagination, the creativity, the adding to what you can do just by having different people in different positions in your formations accomplish those basic figures tremendously adds to the variety of the program without adding to the choreography that you're using. We haven't mentioned contra lines yet either. Contra lines are a very effective way where you either have in its most simplest form, the old Virginia reel with a line of men facing a line of women, and any number of things from do-so-dos to arm turns, not necessarily related to a set pattern dance like the Virginia reel might be considered, or many contras would be considered, but a form like that can be used effectively. We did a session yesterday morning, over the weekend. I did a session on doing dances in a undesirable, not really undesirable, but different circumstances, different hall arrangements that maybe add some challenge to your program because you have to start throwing out certain things in your program that you cannot accomplish. One of the things that I will point out here that I used yesterday is if your hall arrangement, either through pillars down the center of the hall or some other reason, does not lend itself to doing stuff from circles, you can have those trio lines, or lines of four even, facing each other up and down the hall. The lines are running side to side, but they're facing each other up the hall or down the hall. You can do the same type of dancing that you would do from those large circles with those facing lines. And as the lines progress to the front of the hall or the back of the hall, with no one to face, they can then, as a group or individually, turn around to face the group that will be showing up shortly. So there are ways even to overcome hall obstacles. Otto, at this point, maybe you want to expand a little bit on, I don't know if there's some of those things that I mentioned, like the idea I got from you on the circumstances that created that. There was a specific circumstance when you were talking about your lines of three doing a do-so-do. And I don't know if you recall that situation or not, but anything else along those lines, why don't you go ahead and interject those at this time?
Well, number one, when you're in lines of three, you can just about do, in the C and circle especially, you can just about do anything that you could do in a square, you know. So you're unlimited. I've used, like with stars, you've got lines of three, there's mixed boys and girls. There's not all boys in one line. There's not all girls in one line. There might be 5 girls and only 1 guy. And if you're doing a star, you can have those facing counterclockwise are the number ones. That whole line is the left shoulder to the grand center. They're ones. Those with their right shoulders to the grand center of the hall are number 2s. So the right ends of each line can do-so-do diagonally. The left ends can do-so-do diagonally. The centers do-so-do. Well, likewise, you can do the same thing with the stars. All the girls make a right-hand star. All the boys make a right-hand star, left-hand star. The center's right-hand star. The ends directly across. All 6 make a right-hand star or a left-hand star. And what I started using a couple of years ago, and I sent it to Bob Howell, and the next thing I noticed was it was in American squares, was I had the center 2 duck, put their hands on each other's shoulders, duck. And the 4 corners make a right-hand star over the top. Make a left-hand star over the top. Circle those 2. Circle left, circle right. Centers jump up. Don't you feel good? And anything, your mind has got to be operating at clip speed. I don't know if y'all ever realize how fast your mind works while you're calling a dance. You know what you're calling. You see what they're doing. You're watching the timing. You're thinking ahead of what the next move is going to be, and you're saying hello to somebody that's coming in the back of the hall. You can operate 6 channels real easy. And if you're doing that while you're working with new dancers, you adapt. So I ended up in a hall, and some of you got to see it, was that I had 2 circles, 2 rings of trios. Means that's 6 couples wide. Well, how am I going to get that many people in a hall into a couple dance? I changed the couple dance. Instead of being those facing in and those facing out, I changed it at the spur of the moment to the left shoulders, use the left foot, right shoulders, use the right foot, and we did Jiffy Mixer. And instead of backing away and sliding to the right, we backed away and passed through to the next one coming around. And what we ended up with was 6 circles of Jiffy Mixer going around the hall. And so you've got to constantly be adapting to the situation, because you never know when the group is too big for the facility. And I have been in places where he says the trios are going up and down the hall. I've been where they had to open up the garage doors at the end of the building. We ended up outside because of the Cotton Eye Joe and different things that we were doing. There was just no room. But between stars and do-si-dos and circles, you can make a whole evening. It's because, like I said earlier, that it's not the moves that count. It's the entertainment. It's the music and what they're accomplishing. 2 years ago, I talked about, now I've gone blank, senior moment, but we were talking about goals, and you always want the people to be successful, and if they don't enjoy themselves, they're not being successful. And to me, I was talking a while ago that if I can get the dancers just absolutely hanging off the ceilings in the first couple of minutes, they get me hanging off the ceiling, and it grows. The more they grow, the better I get, and the evening just goes on, and I don't know when to quit. And when I don't know when to quit, a 2.5-hour dance ends up 4.5 and 5 hours long. And I don't know if y'all have called any of those, but I've left LSU and the Baptist Student Union where I couldn't hardly walk because I danced with them. I wear a wireless mic, and 5.5 hours dancing and calling is tough.
Before you leave it, I'm hoping to get this microphone out of the stand because it's standing. There we go. We're just going to don't sit down. We're going to, because I want to add to some of what you said, and we're just going to pass it back and forth. This having the lectern and standing up, sitting down just gets to me. We're both used to moving around a lot. Otto mentioned about enthusiasm, and we got a little exercise for everybody to take part in here. There was a caller at a session, this was probably 10 or 15 years ago. They had done a session on showmanship, and it was probably someone like Tony O or one of those callers who was doing the session. And a caller stood up during the question and answer time and said, "Do you have any hints for boring callers?" And he was asking for himself. And I thought, oh my gosh, fella. I mean, if I can be enthusiastic, anybody can be enthusiastic. You could ask people in my high school graduating class of 310 in Boulder, Colorado, and hardly any of them would know who Gregg Anderson was. I went to college in Boulder, and I joined the Square Dance Club, and the metamorphosis started taking place. They haven't been able to shut me up since. But I was a Square Dance caller by night and accountant by day. You talk about a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, folks, if I can do it, you can do it too. Now, the exercise that I want you all to join in, and even if you're a partner or spouse of a caller and you don't normally hold a microphone, I like everybody to take part. We're going to use a little enthusiasm here. And you might use a phrase while you're calling a dance like circle to the left, 8 steps. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, circle right, go the other way back. When you get back home, everybody say, whoa! Okay, now this is where I want you to all join in. When you get back home, I want everybody in the room to say, everybody say, whoa. Okay, and I'll cue you when to do it. So, circle to the left, go round the ring, about 8 steps. Circle right, go the other way back. When you get back home, everybody say, whoa! See, if you add little things like that to your dances, little bits of enthusiasm, and I've seen a tape of what Otto does, and that guy is moving all over the place. Hot Rod is moving all over the place when they're doing those parties. And if you don't have a cordless mic, yes, it's an investment. But boy, those headset microphones, you talk about being able to get out with your group and working with them and having that freedom add to your enthusiasm. It's a wonderful tool. It's one of the best investments I ever made was to get that cordless microphone to where I could get out with the crowd.
I use that, whoa, okay? I use hey. I tell them, I want you to mark the floor. I said, here we go. Just take your foot, mark the floor. When you get back to that spot, I want to hear whoa. We're going to walk forward 4 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, and on the 4th count, I want to hear hey. And I back them up. I said, I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it. And then I said, I'll tell them, all right, let's circle left. Now let's circle back right. Are you home yet? And then you hear that, oh man, that was pitiful. Come on, folks. And then I'll tell them, girls dance up to the middle and back. And this pitiful hey comes out. And God, girls. And then, you guys are not going to be wimpy. And they say, dance up to the middle with a great big, whoa. And I mean, it comes out. And it's things like that. There's, sometimes I use American hand jive. I want them to become active immediately. Number one, if you're doing big groups of kids, you have got to have control. And you've got to have control in 10 seconds. 2 years ago, after CALLERLAB, I went to Oklahoma and I walked in, and there was about 450 teenagers. And it took a minister 15 minutes to get these kids settled down after the church service, after the devotional, for a skit. And the whole time I was saying, I've got to do something real quick because he doesn't have control, and I have got to have control. If I have control at the beginning, I have control for the whole evening. If I don't have control at the beginning, it's all over with. So I walked down on that floor, and wireless mic, wireless remote. Have that music cranked where you want it, already set. Don't have to walk back over and turn the volume up. And I said, are you ready? Let's rumble. You thought I was the guy starting on Monday Night Football. But that's the way you've got to start. And I do that. Anything that gets the people excited, gets them feeling good. I use music that makes them feel good. I don't know what else I could say about that.
While you're pondering that, Otto and I use similar material, I think, and dance formations in our program, but I'm going to let him explain to you a little bit of the way he structures it, and he has a purpose of doing that. But I wanted to talk about the variety that you can achieve in your programs with the Grand March. We've all been to state festivals, national conventions where the Grand March is used. I love to use the Grand March at the parties. I can't always do it because of hall configuration, but if I can do a Grand March, I love to do a Grand March at the parties as a beginner because it is a guaranteed success story. Anyone can do the Grand March. And if you can have those people doing something immediately that is a success for them, it's going to give them more confidence to trust you as the evening progresses with whatever else choreographically comes their way. Now, let's look at the Grand March for a moment. We've done the routine where you have couples going around the hall, counterclockwise, line of dance, and then that couple comes down the middle, which, by the way, if you've got a cordless headset mic, you're out there and you're right there 3 feet from them as you start to lead them down the hall, backing up. And then one couple peels to the one direction, another couple to the other way. When everybody gets to the back, they come down in lines of 4. One line of 4 goes one way, one line of 4 to the other. They get to the back, they come down in lines of 8. If you've got a really big crowd, like we had in an arena in Houston once, have them come down in lines of 16 after that. Okay, that's one element of the Grand March. That gets them to lines of 8 or 16 or whatever. Then you have a choice to make. And this choice can vary from program to program depending on the crowd that you've got and the circumstance of the evening, how long the program's going to be, etc. You can immediately take those lines of 8 and form squares. But there's another choice. You can take that front line, you instruct everybody, do not let go of your neighbor's hand. You take that lead person, and if you're smart, fellas, when you had the first couple come down the middle, there was a pretty girl in that couple. Because they're going to be the front to my left person. I go and take them by the hand. I take her by the hand and say, okay, you bring your entire line with you. And we start across in front. So they're winding back across in front of themselves. We wind back behind where they were standing a moment ago. We go to the end to my left as I'm facing the dancers. And I have that person, that beginning person, that line, latch onto the line. We start weaving in between all of those lines, heading toward the back of the hall. Gradually, each line toward the front gets picked up by the line, and that snake is getting longer and longer and longer. When I get to the back, I'm bringing that line, again, counterclockwise, back toward the front of the hall, and I may be all the way, depending on the size of the crowd, I may be all the way around back to my original right as I'm facing the dancers to the back, and they haven't finished weaving the line back there, and I may have to cut in front of them while they're still weaving the line. I start winding that line of people up into a serpentine or a corkscrew, however you want to describe it. And I'm getting toward the center focus point of that corkscrew. When I start to unwind that corkscrew, and I'm giving them some talk along the way, I start unwinding that. They just get amazed at the geometry of it. And they're just having a ball. People are going different directions because you're starting to unwind it. You're going past all the people that are still coming into the center. Once you get them back out into a big circle, you've got another opportunity for a decision. You can get them back out into the full circle, or you can say, as you get out of there and you start coming forward to the outside, move back with your partner 2 by 2. So you get back to the starting point of couples following couples, a line of dance. And then you can get them all back in a circle and you can progress to a mixer, or you can go to some complete dance form. But there are all those opportunities to utilize the Grand March in different ways depending on what you want to accomplish with your group, what the size of the group will permit. Now, some of the parties that Otto has done, I mean hundreds of people, a Grand March may not be a practical thing to do because with hundreds of people, it can take a lot of time. And if he's got a limited amount of time, and I'll let him talk about this, the time you've got with that group dictates to a certain extent what you can utilize in your program. But you can take we started the normal Grand March. Let's say you started people with a big circle. You can do the corkscrew wind up first and do the unwind and stop there and do a regular Grand March later. Or after you do the corkscrew wind up and unwind, then you can go back into the normal Grand March. So there are many ways to do a Grand March. It becomes one more tool without using a lot of choreography that you're adding to your program to increase the variety, but not the complexity.
Even to the point where, if you're doing schools or what have you, and the guys don't want to touch the girls' hands and all these things, you can have the boys on the left-hand side of the hall, you can have the girls on the right-hand side of the hall, and you all face towards the front of the hall. And then I would get into the middle, and I'd like to have the lines start in the Grand March crossing the center, going towards the back corner, going corner to corner. And when you get into the back corner, turn towards the center and come up as a couple. Because kids will remember, if you do it too often, they will line up with who they want to get with. they'll count. You'll see them. They'll count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She's on 9. I'm going to get 9 spot. And that's where they're going to go. Going back to this serpentine, when you break out of the serpentine, what greater opportunity to break them off either in eighths for a square or eighths. Who says that a contra has to be all boys on one side and all girls on the other side? Who says that the first night that boys have got to dance in boys' positions? Callers say that. But you're not doing a right and left through. You're not doing anything that requires a definition of a person's dance form. You're doing easy stuff. So it's the person on the right, it's the person on the left, it's the inside person, outside person, person facing in, person facing out. And so you can do contras with 3 girls and a guy on one side or whatever, and you were in that 8, and you've accomplished, how many moves have we learned so far? We've only learned circle and forward and back. Did we do a do-so-do? Yeah. Only because we talked about it. Well, we hadn't done it yet. You have. By the way, for those of you listening to the tape, John Caldentaller said that we have done a do-so-do. But, and the amount of time that we spent with the music and with the dance is probably 15 or 20 minutes. Greg said that I do something different with my program. Years ago, I started videotaping, I guess, 1980. I started videotaping. Prior to that, I was shooting film. But I videotaped a lot of my dances, and since I had exhibition groups, I videotaped every week. And I learned that to improve, you have to critique. You have to look at what you do. And a videotape has a real nice tool on it. It gives you the hour, the minute, the seconds, and the frames. And I got back from a dance I was doing west of San Antonio, Dripping Springs, and I looked at the videotape, and I sat there, and I decided I was going to edit this thing, so I wanted to find out where my ins and outs of my cuts were. And I realized, and you're not going to believe this, but 40% of the evening was done dancing, and 60% was setting up formations and teaching. And I realized that I wasn't that entertaining. They were rehiring me, but they were only getting 40% of an evening. And so I started doing everything in threes. If I'm going to do a trio, I'm going to do 3 of them. They can be not facing, all going one direction. I can turn every other line around and have them facing. When I get out of that trio, I'm going to put them in as couples. I'm going to take real quickly, do about 2 couples dances, and then I'll immediately go out there. I say, I want these 4 couples right here. I want all 4 of these guys, I want them to face the line. Now I'm in contras. And I'll do 3 contras. Then everybody back out and let's all face the grand center. And we'll do 3 mixers. Not mixers, line dances. But I do almost everything in threes. And the reason is that once I got them in that formation, I don't have to get them in it 2 more times. 1 time. And I looked up, and I went from 40% of the evening of dance to over 70% of the evening of dance. So that at 2 hours, they're tuckered because I don't take a break. We keep going. I've learned that if you give teenagers a break, you've lost control. They can take a break. We have other things going on, and they will step out. Like on a line dance, they'll step out because I don't believe that through the evening I am going to have 100%. I never look for 100%. I do look for 85 to 90% participation. And I'm absolutely thrilled to death when we've done 2 hours and there's not anyone sitting in a chair. So And that's my goal. When we set goals, I don't know, there's some very experienced callers in this hall, and I remember the years when we started to dance at 6 squares or 10 squares, and at 10 o'clock or 10:30, when the dance was over, there was 10 squares. They hadn't run out of there to get to the restaurant. And when I always set my goals, I was doing real well when I held the floor till the end of the dance, and that's what I try to do on the one-nighters.
Obviously, the kind of crowd that Otto does a lot of dances for are the teenage crowd, which there's nothing more wonderful as far as a high-energy group, a quick learning group. Sponges, yes. Soak up that material. A different type of group, which I do a lot of, are family camps, where we have families that are out for a week's vacation, and they designate a one night of the week to where they're going to have a barbecue dinner outside followed by a dance. Usually during the dinner I'm playing a variety of music that's suitable for a dinner hour so people can still converse. I'm not going to play real lively tunes. I'll play maybe some western songs, some country western tunes. Since I'm in Colorado, I don't play disco and stuff like that during dinner, although I have it with me. But then the dance, although like Otto, I don't take a break. The people are taking a break. They may take a break because I'm alternating in the early part of the evening. I'm getting most everybody up for the Grand March, and then or maybe I preceded that with a dance just for the kids of any age, and then I might follow it with another dance for the kids of any age. So I'm, in the early part of the evening, I'm wanting to make sure that the kids are getting an opportunity to dance. But by the same token, there are certain of these dance forms that work well for the families. There are certain forms, the squares, I quite frankly tend to be somewhat exclusive. I would prefer the younger kids not take part in the squares because I also want to make it a meaningful, enjoyable evening for the adults as well. But the trios are an excellent way to get the kids back involved with the families because with the lines of 3, it's fairly easy for the adults and the older people to help the kids through those. So that when Otto and I were conversing by email prior to the convention, there was a revelation to me about Otto's concept of doing everything in 3s. I'm still not sure I would use it for a lot of my programs because when I do it with a family program, that doesn't lend itself because of the situation of the way I do it with wanting to have specific dances for the kids in what would be a break for the other people. But I can see the wisdom of it. I recently recorded one of my parties because someone had wanted to hear it, so I recorded from him. And when I was editing the mini disc on that, I didn't actually add it up, but I found out that what he says is true about the amount of time taken for setup is incredible, and it really is a revelation to find out how much time that one does spend on things like setup and basic instruction. Of course, with the teenage group, because they do absorb everything like sponges, your instruction time is going to be less than if you have perhaps an older crowd or an international group where English is their second language. I wouldn't be able to talk as fast as I am talking to you when I had an international group where English is the second language because too much would escape their understanding. Otto had mentioned earlier about the Jiffy mixer, and just for purposes of the tape, in case there will be someone listening to this tape later on who is not familiar with the traditional Jiffy mixer, it was written by Jerry Helt decades ago to a classic piece of music, and as a mixer, everybody typically with a circle with the men on the inside of the circle, ladies on the outside, man's left foot, lady's right foot, heel toe twice, and a side close twice or a slide step twice, and then the same thing in the other direction. Everybody jump back or do a chug step backwards away, 4 slow hops away from your partner, and then you walk to the right diagonally to a brand new partner, and the dance starts over. And Otto mentioned that he had used that choreography from the trio lines. You can use it from a circle. You can use it as a line dance. And as a line dance, if you want to make a 4-wall line dance out of it, on the slow walk forward 4, on the 4th step, everybody turns left face a 1/4 turn to face a brand new wall. So you've got something as wonderfully old and a part of our activity like Jiffy Mixer, that all of a sudden has expanded because of the different dance forms that you are using at your party night. So whether you did the line dance version or the circle mixer version earlier in the evening, it gives you the opportunity to use the same footwork in another dance form. So again, adding to the enjoyment, the variety of the evening without burdening the participants with a whole lot of new choreography to learn. Also in the area of the line dancing, because my line dances are spread out during the evening as opposed to Otto doing them as one set of line dances, it makes it extremely easy for me to perhaps use an easy line dance early in the evening and then do the exact same line dance later on with a different piece of music. And I might have used a country western tune earlier in the evening, and then I do the same line dance, and maybe I'll use something like one of the songs from the soundtrack of Lord of the Dance. Again, you're getting a lot of variety. It's a different dance. It feels different to the people, but I don't have this need to cue it entirely all the way through because the dancers have already picked up on the pattern earlier in the evening. And it adds to the variety of the program without having to increase the choreography.
If you can imagine, you've taught a vine right or a vine left in your line dance. And we got to the fairly difficult for non-dancers. But in the way you delivered how you do it, it was like Mona had said, how do you teach a grand square? I changed and didn't talk about the step, like the touch, touch, and a step, 2, 3, other foot, step, 2, 3. All I did was say, the outside person is going to face the opposite direction of the inside person. And listen to what I just said, person. Because I've got 2 guys dancing together, or 2 girls, because I have yet to designate who the dancers are, whether they're dancing a boy's part or a girl's part. There's no such thing. So we just showed you're going to progress to the other side. You're going to go from the right hand, right shoulder to right shoulder, and you're going to slide over, and you're going to become left hand to left hand. And when we did that, it was an easy teach of going touch, touch, and a step, 2, 3, touch, touch, and a step, 2, 3. The brush, the 1, 2, 3 brush, 1, 2, 3 brush was harder. We've already done it. Okay? So when we talk about the vine, it progressed to a point, lo and behold, how many of you know how to do the salty dog rag? We do the salty dog rag with non-dancers on a dance party, because if you do a line dance and you're going to vine to the right, vine to the... What is the salty dog rag? It's the same thing. What's the part where the girl rolls across? We just have her roll across. We show the little twirl, and the guy's doing the vine. That's all he's doing. So we're using just a couple of few steps, and you've got 2-3 hours of entertainment. And we have yet to do a right and left through. We will never do a right and left through. We will do a right and left grand if I stay in squares long enough. But be real truthful. On these parties, the goal for myself now, Greg is different in that the goal for myself is I'm going to get to a square, but I'm not going to become dedicated to that square. In that I'm going to show them all the aspects of square dancing through the evening. I'll be in contra lines, I'll be in couples, I'll be in as mixers. I'll show, of all things, stepping easy. That gives them, and you're not going to believe, teenagers love that dance. And it's an easy round. and it gives them a chance to just feel that music. Stepping easy.
By the way, there will be an opportunity Tuesday night after the banquet at 9 o'clock to see what Otto and I have been talking about. We will be doing a dance at 9 o'clock tomorrow night, incorporating many of the things that we're talking about here, and it'll be an opportunity for you to see not only the way the dance gets put together, although we will obviously have to compromise, but we can do that. We can do it. Otto's a reasonable individual, and I am too, so we can compromise. Yeah, he'll flip his coin, I'll flip my coin, and if they don't agree, we'll have Hot Rod flip a coin. But we'll hopefully have a real enthusiastic program to show you. And one of the things about that program, you'll be able to see the kinds of music selections that we use for different things. You'll be able to see other factors that we've talked about actually put into play. Now, on the subject of music, and while this doesn't specifically relate to the subject of a one-call dance, I realize that everybody has not converted to digital music, and that's fine. I converted to mini disc probably 10 years or so ago, and added CDs. Otto uses likewise the same type of music. It's perfectly understandable if at your stage of life or your interest or your budget or whatever, you may not want to make that digital conversion and you're still using 45 RPM records, and that is fine. But the one thing I would implore you, please take a critical look at your music, and if your 45 RPM record is scratched and you're hearing those pops and hisses on your sound system, please buy a new record. Please, please, please. You've got, especially if you're doing parties for teenagers, they go to the movie theater and they hear THX stereo sound in those movie theaters. They don't want to come out and hear a scratchy record at a dance. So please keep your music up to date as far as the quality of the music. If a new record comes out that I hear on the tape service, whether it be a round dance or a singing call, if I hear some pops and hisses and cracks on that record, I won't buy that song no matter how good the instrumentation is, because I want to present a quality musical program, because the music is as much a part of the choreography and the enthusiasm and anything else that you use. It's an integral part of that program. So that's just a side note on that. One of the other things that comes up, not only in choreography that might be used for the dances, but when you get to singing calls. I love to use singing calls in the squares for the parties. I know one caller who rarely uses a singing call, which just flabbergasts me because he's got a fine singing voice, and I don't know why he doesn't use the singing calls. But in my opinion, and this is my opinion only, timing necessarily has to go out the window on a singing call. We as professionals try to pay attention to the timing lists. They've been developed over the years by members of CALLERLAB committees who have fine-tuned these timing lists to where we know how many beats of music it takes to do all of our basics, whether they be mainstream or plus, whatever. And we try to do a good professional job in doing singing calls for experienced dancers that are properly timed, so the dancers have the right amount of time but not too much time to do that, accomplish that figure in the 64-beat phrasing of the singing call pattern. But I believe that with the new dancer at the party event, you've got to allow, it doesn't bother me if they get home and they're standing for a little bit while the other square over here is still arriving at home position. That's fine. As long as I've got good music and enthusiasm, I want to have them succeed. And if that means allowing more time than an experienced dancer would need to accomplish the simple choreography of that singing call, that's fine. It doesn't bother me one bit.
In fact, on that note, I will always, in fact, Hot Rod says, you've got them. For those of you listen to the tape, my wife's name is Hot Rod. She says that you had them stand 8 beats. You didn't time that out right. Well, at the same time, if they did not make that promenade halfway and come down the middle, and courtesy turn and make a right-hand star or what have you, whatever figure I might have come up with, because a lot of this stuff, I'm looking at what I had called earlier, and I'm doing a figure, believe it or not, what I feel that they're capable of doing without me teaching a figure. I don't want to teach a figure. I do a lot of schools now where the school teacher has taught the do-si-do, has taught right-hand star, and in some classrooms might have taught a right and left grand. If you're in an elementary school and you've done kindergarten through 5th grade, there might be 4 of those grades that never did a right and left grand, and here you arrive and you're the professional caller, and the first thing that comes out of your mouth is circle left, face your partner do-si-do, stick out a right hand, let's do a right and left grand, and they look at it like, say what? And so you have to really, I can't stress the point of reading the floor. It's the best thing that I can say is when you went out and you went country western dancing or ballroom dancing and the band played music that they liked and they never watched how many people were on the floor. And every third tune was a cha-cha, and every third tune had one couple out there that could cha-cha. Okay? Well, I feel that way when I'm calling, in that it's my responsibility. And what did years ago Marshall Flippo said, somebody asked him, when do you call a left out a man? And he says, when I see the first square starting to break down, because everybody paid the same at the door. And that's the way I feel about calling to these open dances. And I do adult dances. It sounds like I'm doing all teens, but I guess our name has been spread that we're really enthusiastic, and we do college students and primarily Baptist and Methodist churches, and a lot of Baptist churches.
Another thought on the singing call, I don't do partner changes on singing calls at parties. I used to years ago, and just finally wised up and concluded I mean, you're so used to doing partner changes on the singing calls for your experienced dancers, but there's nothing that says you have to do a partner change, and the success ratio goes up immensely if you don't do a partner change on the singing calls. There also is no reason I don't do as much set pattern calls as I used to do. It ends up being more like a regular patter call at a square dance club, where you're varying the routines for the dancers that are out there. Even if you're featuring stars in a patter call, you can have all 8 dancers make a left-hand star or a right-hand star. Head couples make a left-hand star or a right-hand star. All the men, all the ladies. So there's all varieties of stars. So if you want to throw in a lot of variety, you can do a regular hash call during the patter tip, throwing in different choreography so that you're letting them dance to things that they learn how to do through your very brief instruction, but you don't have to be structured to a way to where you are doing the set routine over and over and over again, where they obviously are memorizing it as they go. So the variety, there's no reason not to use the variety in that regard that you would normally use at a regular dance.
Going back to that star, if you're in a set square and you said 4 guys make a right-hand star, and you've already said that number 1 couple has their back to the sound equipment, because a lot of times I'm not in fact, most of the time I'm in the middle of the floor when I call. And number 2 is to their right, and number 3 is facing the sound equipment. Why do you have to say head men make a right-hand star, or side men? I say couple, number 1 gent and number 2 gent make a right-hand star. Number 2 gent, number 4 gent. And what happens is it gets them to thinking. And when you start doing multiples, where you've got all the minds operating at once, in a trio line facing each other, heads make a right-hand star, the centers make a right-hand star, the ends make a left-hand star, centers make a left-hand star, ends make a right-hand star, centers do a two-hand swing, ends do a do-si-do, and you're doing multiple calls, and man, their minds are going, they're just reeling, and you're doing it all in eighths because they can do it. And what you've got is you've got attention, they've got excitement, because let me tell you, when they get finished with that, they are just thrilled. They have made it. And you're just chattering that stuff out at 90 to nothing. And adults can do that. It's not just teens or young adults. It's you get them so that they're totally listening to you, and it becomes very entertaining, and all you've done was stars. But you go out and you call a regular square dance, and you start doing some of that stuff, and they ain't going to fly, I'm going to tell you that. So, but the people that come out for the one-nighters or the first night of lessons, they can do that stuff. So,
checking my watch here, we do only have about 10 or 15 more minutes, and before we get to any closing comments by Otto or myself, if anybody has a question or a comment that you would like to direct for the purpose of the audience on the tape or the people here, please step to the microphone, identify yourselves, and proceed.
John Thaler from Pocono Pines. When you said that you had a dance in which you worked for about 5 hours and at the end you were mentally exhausted as well as physically exhausted, what is what you consider to be the normal period of time for a one-night party time, and what do you recommend as they say, how long should we go?
All right, I'm going to tell you that I'm a ham. And so when I got up, and some of y'all saw the video, the minister told the kids for the next hour. Well, that just devastated me, because I want to work 2 hours. I have a plan in my mind before I got there of the material I wanted to use. I am real comfortable working 3 hours. I can work a lot of hours, because when I walk in, I have 25 mini discs. They hold 25 tunes. There's at least 25 to 30 mixers. I have about 40 line dances. So the repertoire is real long. But it's real long because I've been doing it a long time. It's I like the 2-hour dance, the 2.5-hour dance. I don't like the 4.5-hour dance. It's somewhere in there, somebody has got to pray. We've got to take a break. We've got to eat, because I become physically exhausted. And most of the time on those things, I've got a 300 or 400 mile drive to get back home afterwards.
Mel Estes, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I do quite a few one-night stands around the University of Alabama and some of the bigger churches there in town. First of all, I'd like to share with you a very embarrassing moment at doing a one-night stand. Not very long ago, a couple of weeks ago, I must have had about 125 college kids there, and we were doing our thing, trying to do our thing, and we had one particular girl that everything I said to do, she did just about the opposite. And so finally, I got to the point of frustration, which I shouldn't have done, but I was. And I said, I purposely told her, I said, honey, you're going the wrong way. Every time I tell you to do something, you're going the wrong direction. So then I started back up with my program again, and a lady in the back of the room, one of the students in the back of the room, held her hand up and says, hold it just a minute. She come running all the way across the floor, up on the stage where I was, and whispered in my ear, that little girl is retarded. And I felt about 2 feet high for doing what I had done. But that's just sharing a moment with you. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about is when you have college students, that's mostly what I do for one-night stands, and you put your music on to start with, like Greg was talking about a while ago, and they all start, and they get so loud till they can't hear you over the microphone. They're clapping so loud. What do you do to overcome that? And I've got a 300-watt Hilton, too.
Number one, going back to the first little story, I'm going to tell you that, number one, I don't ever say anything to the floor about how they do anything. I could care less if when I said, let's make a right-hand star, and I see a left-hand star. All I want to do is see a star. If I say circle left, and I see them pushing and shoving, and one is more dominant in that group, and it goes right, I could care less. I'm there to entertain. I am not there to instruct. They're not there to take lessons. So that's my goal, to entertain. So that part does not bother me. Now, the clapping, God, I'm telling you right now, that's what I live for. If they're jumping up, most of these dances, I'm telling you, I wrote an article about, in fact, I've got a script for a video I've sent to Craig, and golly, I've got two friends, Gregg Anderson, and
I got more friends than that. You only got two?
But the problem is they got names that are similar, okay? And in the script, it talked, now I lost track. I live for that. That's something I could care less. I want noise. That's what I want them to do. I want to hear that. And I'm going to tell you, folks, I don't use yak stacks. Neither does he. I use the old Newcomb DP4 speakers. Great big old 12-inch woofers in there. When these kids go to dances, they don't hear the music, they feel it. And I've got to produce something that they can feel. And I crank, and I'm going to tell you, I use a 200 Hilton, and I push 2 DP4s. And if it gets really bad, I patch out of mine, and I go into their 2,000-watt amplifier that they've got there.
Okay, so what you're really saying is you overpower them. Yeah, but no, he's denying it, folks who are listening to tape. He's over here denying it, but it's a valid point. If they're clapping so loud that they cannot hear your command, what is it that you're really doing? Are you turning the voice up so that they can really, because they have to hear you. Now, I realize that there's some variation. If you say star right and they're starring left because they didn't hear you, that's okay. But there are other critical parts of the instruction where they must hear you, and I gather that you're really turning the volume up so they can hear you. Now, be honest, Otto.
We're shaking. I'm telling you. I don't have to worry about hearing aids. I don't have to worry about any of that. We shake. If you have gone to hear contemporary Christian music, you know it shakes. And when those kids start clapping, I start getting a high. And I get out there, and it is like nothing you've ever seen. A 66-year-old guy just strutting. I mean, we get it on. When we're doing the trio and it's going down the line, I'm going with them. And it's, and I do that thing from any direction. And Nora and I work as a mirror to each other so that we're constantly moving so that the floor will always see the side that can best instruct. So we're always moving, and that clapping to me is not a problem. It has never been a problem in that somehow or another, I don't know what I do. I really don't. But I get control of it. Yes.
Stu Shackler from Brandenburg, Kentucky. Two things that I wanted to mention. First of all, we've talked about how important it is to have information about the group you're working with. And I was called by KOA to come out to the campground and to do some one-night stand stuff. Well, that was fine. I said, well, who's going to be there? How many adults? How many children? Do you want children dance? Do you want adults? Yeah, we want all that good stuff. So I said, fine. So I went out, and after we did something with the adults, and then we decided to do something with the children, I had the children on the floor, and we were doing Gustav Skoll. 1, 2, 3. And a sort of a Skoll to the king. Dance Gregg, for those of you who don't know, it's a dance for the King of Denmark. And the up to the center and skull means, showing the king how important he is and sort of honoring him. Well, after my explanation of what we're doing, all of these people came out on the floor and drug their kids off the floor. And the kids were crying, we want to dance, we want to dance. And, no. Found out it was a religious organization that does not allow any type of honor to anybody else other than their God. So consequently, I didn't know this, but here I was in a situation that parents were dragging their kids off the floor. So it is important to know who you're going to be working with. The other item I'd like to mention to you is a source that some of you have not got into yet, and that is elder hostels. I work with an elder hostel group. We do about 8 of them a year, and we have an experience where you have mixed. People look in their schedule and they say, hey, here's square dancing, let's go. And you may get 2 squares of advanced dancers, and the rest of them have never danced before. And you then have got to come up with something to satisfy this group. So we start at the basics and go. And then I always have something on the side for the more experienced dancers to try to satisfy their little need. But they always take part in that beginner level stuff. And we don't have just one night of it. We have 5 days of it, and each lesson is an hour and 15 minutes. So that gives you more time to work with them and build to a higher level. And I normally will take a group of experienced dancers at a different time, and we'll work out a demonstration exhibition type thing. And then on the last evening, we'll have a gathered dance, and we will do this demonstration for the people to let them see what other dancing figures can be added in and so on. So it's an experience, but you've got to sort of improvise, adjust, and modify.
Absolutely. We're almost out of time, but we've got 3 more people with questions and comments, so please step to the microphone.
Hey, I'm Hot Rod from Trinity. We do squares, but very little squares. He stretched it, but we really find that squares is the last thing that we do for the dancers. And we do go ahead and dance when we have families and all. We most time have the little ones dancing all the time with the parents. If we get them to a square or get complicated, then they can't do it, but they will go ahead and do all the dances. And the parents, the only one we'll have the parents sit down on is the 7 jumps. Otherwise, we have parents and the little kids, and they'll work with them. And you have to have adults that are willing to, if they have a teenager or a 12-year-old, they've got to be willing to work with a little bitty 3-year-old or 4-year-old that will come to them. But we have fun with all of them.
You can tell I'm used to a cordless mic. For the purpose of the tape, I just tripped over the cord.
Is there a name for that move, Greg? Don Beck, Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. Just a couple of quick comments that popped into mind. One is when the audience is making a lot of noise or not really following what you're saying because, styling isn't quite right, what have you. I've learned to calm myself when I get upset by that by saying, if they're having fun, don't get in their way. But one of the things I came here for was I've known for a long time fewer is better, and I think I'm guilty compared to what you guys do of using too many calls. But one thing that Otto said that I don't do, something that you teach that I find I can really shortcut, improve comprehension, improve the success rate, is I don't teach couples number 1, 2, 3, and 4. I just teach heads and sides. And in fact, when I teach a beginners, a mainstream class, I probably teach the couple numbers at the end, last night, because they don't need it unless they're dancing to some other caller than myself. Because most of our club choreography is symmetric. And teaching heads and sides is much easier for them to grasp and much faster to teach.
The whole deal with the number 1, 2, 3, and 4. I do the grapevine twist. I do chase the rabbit, chase the squirrel, chase the pretty girl around the world. Things of that thing where it's a single couple move. And that gets them listening to, and you can do that real quick. And that's the reason I number. Otherwise, it's heads and sides all the way.
My approach, and differs with a lot of stuff you did, is to try to keep it as similar to Western club dancing so that those that really like it might want to go on to that rather than go on to the couple 1, do this, and what have you. So I try to keep it as close to that mold. So heads and sides work great for me, but if you're doing single couple stuff to add to your repertoire that way, that's obvious. And as you said, they don't need heads and sides. So again, either way, you're eliminating one factor that a lot of people try to teach, and fewer is better. Great.
Yes.
Bob DeYoung, Traverse City, Michigan. Do you have different RPM levels for your MDs, your CDs? If you have a one-nighter, I'm new at this, but for seniors, say at a church group, can they keep up? Do you have different, a slower RPM, or is it just one level? Question number one. Number two, what is the fee range?
The last question is the hardest, so we'll defer that for just a little bit. As far as the RPMs, yes, you have to take into account senior citizens versus a teenage group. Thank goodness with the digital technology, I mean, we've always had the ability to vary the speed on our records, and now many of the mini-disc players have speed controls, pitch controls, and CDs do as well. A few years ago, 5 years ago, when I bought my variable speed CD player, I wanted a CD player that had two things, variable speed and a remote control. At that time, the only one that I found available was made by Denon, D-E-N-O-N. And not only is it variable speed, but the remote control was a wristwatch type remote that I fastened to my wrist, which, I mean, doing parties for teenagers, I mean, that's really a plus. You say, check this out, guys. And you're out, got your Dick Tracy watch, and you're out there, and you press the button, and it can change the speed or change the pause the music or start the music, etc. So the technology is there, and is certainly available to use.
Okay.
The question is the fees. The very basic comment is that almost any party pays more than a square dance club. I mean, almost without exception. You'd almost have to, I mean, they pay a lot more. But it depends on the group. I don't know. It depends on the area as well.
And it depends on the compassion.
Yeah.
Okay? I've been booked for a lot of money, and I got there, and I saw the group, and turned around, and they had already had the check, and I wrote a check back to them because I'm not an evil old man.
Yeah.
And so
Sure.
I look at it. Some people say, how much? I'm calling to a lot of people. I mean, a small dance to me is $125. I am telling you, when I square up, and I'll square up 3 groups this month, I'll have 1,500 people. And you just figure that a Coke per person, and you multiply it times 1,500, and you're buying it outside, okay? It's, but there's travel. I go to Florida, I go to Oklahoma, go to Louisiana, go to Arkansas. So, and you never dream that for one-nighters. Gregg Anderson was coming to Houston. I stole that dance from him.
In fact, the gentleman, Len Berquist down here from Colorado Springs, when years ago when I was traveling to Houston on a fairly regular basis, I made about 20 trips down to Houston and to South Padre Island for one of the Baptist churches in Houston, and I was telling Leonard about that, and he says, don't they know they got a callers down there? And I said, no, and I didn't tell them. But they eventually figured it out, and I could not have turned it over to better hands than Otto Warteman. We're going to have to close the session off. I do hope that you will keep in mind that there is the dance tomorrow at 9 o'clock following the banquet. We are in stiff competition tomorrow night. At the same time, our dance is going on that Otto and I will be doing. There is a Women and Callers dance featuring all of these fabulous women callers at the convention. I would encourage you to come to our dance so you can see firsthand what is going on, because, fellas, the only thing that's going to happen if you go to the Women and Callers dance, you're going to have a wonderful time and you're going to fall in love again. And quite frankly, we, just for your own safety, prefer you buy that tape and come to our dance. So would you please tell your friends, have them come out tomorrow night and see what's going to go on. Thank you for coming. Oh, excuse me. Oh, we'll be doing a session tomorrow on how to get parties as well, but that's in your program. So thank you so much for coming.